Greetings, brethren, and a very happy Sabbath to you on this 31st day of January 2015 on the pagan Roman calendar. It's the 11th day of the 11th month on God's holy sacred calendar. That means we're roughly about 2 months away from Passover. Now, today, excuse me, brethren, we are going to go quickly through a review of some news. I'm not going to play the videos. That's what Nightcast is for, Sunday through Thursday night on the Nightcast channel. I'm going to kind of do it sermon style, but not exactly like a sermon. I will be reading these news stories to you, shorts from stories that range back to a little over a month ago and then right up to the current moment because of what has just happened in Europe, in Greece, that threatens Europe and the EU and the euro. And that also has impact and effect upon the dollar. It also has this new crisis in Europe has tremendous impact on how the 10 nations that eventually shape down to be the United States of Europe in a real, true confederation of politics, a political union, economics, a solid single currency that they'll either go to a new single solid currency or they will rescue out yet this euro, which is really it's the Dutch mark with a different name on it. Even though some in Germany would like to pull out of the euro because of what's happened as many other countries adopted the German currency. I mean, just look at the bottom line. Helmut Kohl started that for 20 years, 2 decades. He pitched for it in Germany, and in his last couple of years in office, they're finally cranking it around where they can do it. They do it for a couple of years as a bookkeeping function and got a number of countries to go along with that. Then in 2000, 2001, they started actually printing the coinage, the paper money for it, and circulating it among the people in a number of countries. One by one, they converted their national currency over to this single European currency, the euro, because it fulfilled a dream that many in Europe have had for a long time, for an economic union with a single currency over there in Europe. And the idea, really, bottom line, they won't say it. Well, they won't say it fully or completely, but some will say it under their breath. They want that Yankee dollar out of Europe. They want that Yankee dollar off the books for the standard, the standard of value around the world. They want the American dollar not to be the standard of value. They want their currency to be the standard of value and the reserve currency, and the petro currency. And that's what it's all about. It's a big economic war, and it's also a war with Germany behind it, it's a war for ruling the world. The modern day Assyrians are the German people, and they never have gotten that out of their blood. They want to rule the world. That's the bottom line of it. They want their empire on top. But here's the news. Let's review it for the last 30 days. And this important Sabbath subject, Nightcast, we go through the day's current news. Sometimes I can go back to something or another, but there's always so much current news, we got to stick with the current news on Nightcast. But today, brethren, for you, I'm going to summarize some of the important stories that are relevant to how things are shaping that go back to about a month ago and right up to this week. It's current news, and just a few days ago when Greece put in power the Syriza party that is a big anti-austerity party. If you're not watching world news, it may be a little over your head what I'm saying in brief terms, and I can't take the time to explain that all. You need to be watching nightly. I encourage you to watch Nightcast, but you can do it on your own, but why not take advantage of what we spend the whole day doing for you and then summarizing it and putting together the most pertinent stories with video that we are able to show because of a licensing agreement we have with the BBC. All right, first story. After victory for the far-left Syriza party in Greece, Europe enters yet another crisis. As we look at the events of the last few weeks, going back to about early December even, notice that most of the time the concern is over how Germany will react. The present situation in Europe, a financial union without a political union, is doomed, some are saying. Something has to give, and soon. And friends, some of you may remember that Mr. Herbert W. Armstrong often would tell us that, or not necessarily often, but he did tell us the three elements that, at college he did. He told us the three elements that are necessary for that United States of Europe to really come together. They are that it be an economic union with a single currency, and we began to see that come together with the implementation of the euro, and it's gone through some struggles. It's in a big struggle and battle now, and in the next few days and weeks, it's going to be interesting to see how the God of this world works that out, and how God in heaven allows the God of this world to work that out. He's going to allow it so that at the right time, when the time for the delay that God has put into effect, a long delay since Mr. Armstrong's death, for our sake, brethren, and I can say this openly with you here on the Sabbath TV channel, he did a delay. He even told us in Scripture that our Lord would delay his coming, but some of us now understand the reason for that. A reason for that is for your sake and my sake, because some of us weren't ready. He tells in Matthew 25, he gives the parable of the 10 virgins. We won't go through that today. We might do that another time. You might want to review that on your own. But I want to get through these stories, so I don't want to let myself get off into any diversion. This first story back from December 8th, 2014, just this past December. This is not the exact title. I'm going to summarize for you. This article coming from the Telegraph, the United Kingdom Telegraph, asked the question, is Germany losing faith in the Euro project? And I'm going to pick out some piquant points that Peter Spence, the economics correspondent for the United Kingdom Telegraph newspaper, said in his article of December 8. Let me see, do I have a different, this will work better for this article. The Nordic bank, Nordea, has pointed to potential breaking points in the euro area. They feel that the number one problem is Germany losing faith in the euro project. Unrest over the European Central Bank's ECB policy, considered to be too stimulatory for the German economy, could reach a tipping point. As the likelihood of outright quantitative easing by the central bank increases, faith in the institutions may crumble in Germany. Faith in the institution of the ECB, the European Central Bank, and the euro itself. Quantitative easing would emphasize the differing views of the German Bundesbank, in which the Germans take great pride. And the ECB said Mr. von Guericke, chief strategist for developed markets at Nordea, this in turn could increase the popularity of the anti-euro Alternative for Germany party, and heighten, Germany in German starts with a D, Deutsch. So their party is abbreviated AfD, Alternative for D in English would mean German. AfD is the anti-Euro Alternative for Germany party, and heighten investor fears that the country will launch its own currency. So the mark that turned into the euro that many other countries adopted may dump the euro on them and create its own new currency. That's the thinking on that. God may not allow that, though. German courts. Now, another story, this one from the 14th of January this year. German courts versus the European Central Bank. Reuters news story. I'm going to give you the summary of that story from January 14. Conflicting views between EU and German courts on whether the European Central Bank's 2012 bond buying program broke EU law might mean Germany leaving the Eurozone, according to the Eurosceptic Alternative for Germany, AfD party. Now, they said that on a couple of days before January 14. An advisor at the European Court of Justice said that week, January 14, that the scheme, which has never been used but is credited with stabilizing the euro, fell within the ECB's remit. That appeared to contradict the view of Germany's Constitutional Court, which is pictured here. This is a picture of their building, of the Germany Constitutional Court, which last year said there was reason to think it went beyond the bank's mandate. AfD leader Bernd Lucke said that if the ECJ, the European Court of Justice, followed the advisor's opinion, which is usually what happens, it would be in serious conflict with Germany's Constitutional Court in Karlsruhe, southwestern Germany. And that's the building of the Constitutional Court pictured on your screen now. The judges in Karlsruhe would then consider the ECJ's ruling, the ruling by the European Court of Justice, and here's a picture of those fellows. Their ruling tantamount to, so the Constitutional Court of Germany would consider this court, the European Court of Justice's ruling, tantamount to contempt of the EU treaties, so they'd have to conclude that the euro is no longer a community of stability. Now, that was a quote from by Handelsblatt. According to the jurisprudence of the Constitutional Court, this would open the responsibility of Germany leaving the Eurozone, said Lucke, who is an economics professor. And then, friends, we'll turn to another story. I'm just going through highlights of a few stories from December 8 right up to the current moment. So those of you who tune in here on the Sabbath can get a certain overview of what's been happening in the past few weeks and why we are where we are with the news right now and the impact of what that means. On January 15, Reuters reporter Alice Bagjian and Silke Koltrowitz, now these people with these foreign names, and I've just slugged through those. They wrote an article on January 15 in Reuters, and here's a summary of what they said. Just days before Europe's quantitative easing announcement, dramatic events in Switzerland shocked the financial world. The Swiss National Bank, pictured here in this picture, shocked financial markets Thursday of that week, January 15, by scrapping a 3-year-old cap on the franc, the Swiss franc, sending that nation, the Swiss, sending the currency of Switzerland, the Swiss franc, soaring against the euro, and stocks plunging on fears for the export-reliant Swiss economy. Only days before that, during that week, January 15, the Swiss National Bank officials had described the 1.2 francs per euro cap introduced in 2011 at the height of the Eurozone crisis to fend off deflation and a recession. They more recently described that cap as, that 1.2 cap, as a policy cornerstone. The U-turn, doing a 180 on it, sent the franc nearly 30% higher against the euro in chaotic early trading a week before the European Central Bank was expected to unveil their bond buying program to counter deflationary pressures. All of that fed speculation that this quantitative easing scheme will be so big that the Swiss National Bank would have struggled to defend the cap. On social media, the move was dubbed as Franco-geddon, like Armageddon, but Franco-geddon. All right, then, friends, another story we're going to turn to now from the 16th of January. There's a series of important stories, 14th, 15th, 16th January. Let's see, where am I getting this one from? I'll tell you in a moment. The summary on this story is Germany could be next. The tsunami that hit global currency markets following the Swiss National Bank's decision was the most dramatic that the author of this story I'm reading to you can remember, friends. I failed to make note of his name, and I can't think of it at the moment, but this is a story from January 16. The euro trashed 30% almost immediately. That is to say, the Swiss franc appreciated 30%. Bam! Swiss citizens were 30% richer. Now, admittedly, the Swiss has since retraced some of its gains, that Swiss franc. But the move to abandon the euro peg is bound to stir some emotions in the German psyche. Deliberately weakening currencies has been the game plan for most central banks ever since the financial crisis erupted. The dogma says that a lower currency helps exports. That's the line we're all fed. And in the short term, there's clearly logic there. A lower currency means lower export prices. But here's the problem. If every central bank tries to weaken, then it's a zero-sum game. Over the long run, a strong currency regime such as Switzerland is doing is far healthier for the economy. It encourages savings and investment, things the Germans know all about. In modern times, Germany has rebuilt its nation not once, but twice, as it incorporated East Germany. Like the Swiss, they're not keen on the Southern European economics. Here's the point. I contend that Germany will at some point make a volte-face, an about-face, much as the Swiss have now done. And friends, the story going next. Again, another story from the 16th of January. And the caption with this photograph, with this story, friends, reads, as this story by Ambrose Evans Pritchard, the Swiss economy has been muddling through over the past year, but the output gap is still 1% of gross domestic product. Switzerland, a country that has until now been seen as one of the most financially stable nations in the world, appears to have lost control, according to this next article. A month ago, the Swiss authorities were still claiming that their currency floor was crucial to prevent a deflation trap. They were right. The Swiss National Bank has lost control. It is the latest in a list of vulnerable central banks to be overwhelmed by deflationary forces and global economic disorder. The country is already in deflation. The Swiss franc ended Thursday, the week of January 16, 2 weeks ago, 13% higher after the Swiss National Bank abandoned its 3-year efforts to defend a currency floor of 1.2 to the euro. We have a free exchange rate, once again, said the Swiss National Bank's president, Thomas Jordan. It means that the European Central Bank can no longer keep dragging its feet on quantitative easing. Whether the ECB announces a $1 trillion blitz next week, now I'm reading to you a January 16 story, friends, and in fact, as you know, those of you following the news know that, in fact, that did happen. They did announce a €1 trillion blitz. But he's saying whether they do that or just 500 billion, half of that, funds are already flooding into Switzerland from the Eurozone. The Swiss National Bank has to pick its poison. It is damned for one set of reasons if it holds the currency peg, and damned for another set if it ditches the peg. Welcome to the world of horrible dilemmas facing modern central banks. And then this next story, friends, the European Central Bank did in fact launch that €1 trillion rescue plan. This story by Jonathan Gould and John O'Donnell. The European Central Bank took the ultimate policy leap during the week of January 16. Let me back up for a moment and make sure I'm giving you the right date. Now, January 22nd. So now we're into the next week. Yeah, when they were anticipating that $1 trillion euro blitz. And this is reporting January 22nd that they did. We're getting close to current date now. The European Central Bank took the ultimate policy leap Thursday, the week of January 22nd, that would have been Thursday of last week, launching a government bond buying program which will pump hundreds of billions in new money into a sagging Eurozone economy. The ECB said it would purchase sovereign debt from this March until the end of September 2016, despite opposition from Germany's Bundesbank and concerns in Berlin that it could allow spendthrift countries to slacken economic reforms. The flood of money impressed markets. The euro fell more than 2 U.S. cents to 1.14 on the announcement. The flood of money impressed markets. The euro fell from more than 2 U.S. cents to 1.14 on the announcement, and European shares hit 7-year highs. All eyes on Mario Draghi, and he has delivered a bigger bazooka than investors were expecting, said Mauro Vitorangeli, a fixed income specialist at Allianz Global Investors, adding that the news marked an historic crossroads for European markets. The ECB and the central banks of Eurozone countries will buy up bonds in proportion to its capital key, meaning more debt will be scooped up from the biggest economies, such as Germany, than from small member states, such as Ireland. A German lawyer who has been prominent in attempts to halt Eurozone bailouts said he was already preparing a legal complaint against the bond buying program. One Eurozone central bank source said 5 policymakers opposed the expanded asset purchase plan. The central bank's chiefs of Germany, the Netherlands, Austria, and Estonia, along with executive board member Sabine Lautenschläger, a German with a German name that's not easy for me to enunciate. All right, friends, going to one of our last one or two stories on this, how Draghi got divided. How Draghi got divided ECB to say yes to money printing. This is a story from January 26th by Reuters, London writer Paul Taylor. The caption with this photograph with this story, friends, reads, a European Central Bank ECB president, or let me start that again. It says, European Central Bank President, ECB President Mario Draghi, and Vice President Victor Constancio on the left leave after addressing an ECB news conference in Frankfurt. You know, their headquarters for the ECB is in Frankfurt. That's also the place where the emperors of the Holy Roman Empire are crowned. The Emperor's Hall is in Frankfurt, Germany. It's in the City Hall building up on the second floor. It's got all those portraits and statues of past kings and emperors, including the emperors of the Holy Roman Empire. And although it was bombed toward the end of World War II, thanks to the United States taxpayers and the good old Marshall Plan, that Emperor's Hall, where the emperors of the Holy Roman Empire are crowned in a coronation ceremony by the Pope, has been rebuilt according to the old architectural plans, new material, beautiful building, all ready to go for the Pope to come over and crown the seventh and final head of the Holy Roman Empire. But let's go back, let's go with this story from January 22. Well, let's see, actually this story is from January 26th. Yeah, and it's referring to an event that will occur on January 22, or that did occur, a news conference that Mario Draghi held. When Mario Draghi announced at that news conference, January 22, that the European Central Bank's trillion euro scheme to buy government bonds, he acknowledged that in the round of strategies to revive inflation and boost the economy, the bank had just played its last hand. Asked by reporters what would happen if the plan to purchase 60 billion euros of assets a month for 19 months failed, Draghi answered, "We have Plan A, period." In other words, they don't have a Plan B. For more than a year now, economics and central bankers have pressed for dramatic action to halt tumbling inflation, sagging price expectations, and a stagnating economy. But fierce resistance from German politicians and the influential Bundesbank meant Draghi could not move until he had slowly and painstakingly built overwhelming support in the ECB's policymaking governing council for the monetary gamble. The Italian ECB chief's first tactic was to chop the decision into separate questions, a strategy he thought most likely to construct as broad a consensus as possible for quantitative easing. He first sought agreement on the principle that buying sovereign bonds of all Eurozone member states in the secondary market in proportion to their share in the central bank's capital was a legitimate tool of monetary policy. This not only built a vital foundation, but also neutralized official German opposition. For the writer of this article, he says the most important thing was we all agreed it was legal, including the Germans on the council, according to one participant. He suggested that only liability for jointly issued EU and European Investment Bank bonds be mutualized, and that the default risk on the other 80% of government debt to be bought should fall on national central banks. Draghi argued that while many of us want to see a European fiscal and political union with mutualized debt issuance, this requires a political decision. And I was going to mention to you earlier, Mr. Armstrong said 3 elements were necessary for that United States of Europe to really shape together: an economic union, a political union. So Mr. Draghi's talking about they need that political union to make this economic union situation work. And then for it to be a full power United States of Europe, the third thing Mr. Armstrong said it would need would be a military union, and that we can anticipate because they'll form a military that they'll send in to surround Jerusalem. And that's a key for the 1335 and the 1290. That's something that'll be occurring between the 1335 and the 1290. At the 1290, when we see armies surrounding Jerusalem, that's one of the factors that'll tell us, whoops, 1290 has started. But you got 30 days to be flown over to the wilderness God has prepared for the Philadelphia era of his church. Now, this story says the unelected central bankers should not do what we were reading about in the story through the back door. One participant was complaining about that. He said this most disputed aspect of the decision to ring-fence most of the risk was a concession to German Chancellor Angela Merkel and the Bundesbank, and it was designed to allay German hysteria, said another source. The source added that it was of little practical relevance since risk would inevitably be shared among Eurosystem central banks if a Eurozone country defaulted. Draghi briefed Merkel on his intentions at a private meeting in Berlin on January 14, just a couple of weeks ago this month. Despite her stated concerns about the sweet poison of easy money causing speculative bubbles and loosening pressure on governments to carry out painful reforms, Merkel indicated she would respect the bank's independence, a source briefed on the conversation said. The purpose was to let her know what was in the pipeline so she would not be negatively surprised, the source said. The main change was more front-loading to try to achieve a sense of shock and awe in the markets, another person involved in the decision said. And the program is semi-open-ended. We subtly kept the door open for more if needed. Advocate General Pedro Cruz Villalon rebuffed a German legal challenge to a previous, as yet unused bond buying scheme. He found overwhelmingly in the ECB's favor. That opinion made things much easier. It was very helpful in the process. It made it much harder for the Germans to argue against quantitative easing, an ECB policymaker said. By upholding the ECB's independence and refraining from public criticism, Merkel has blunted German dissent against the decision, which will be reviewed in September 2016. Now, I know that was a long story. That's one of the more current ones and a very important one, friends. This last one here, How the European Dream is Dying, State by State, is from an article by Bruno Waterfield on January 26. And we're not able to use those graphics with it, but I have some others. As the victory of the anti-austerity Syriza party in Greece shakes financial markets across Europe, Europe is being swept by a wave of popular disenchantment and revolt against mainstream political parties and the European Union. In 2007, a majority of Europeans, 52%, trusted the EU. That level of trust has now fallen to a third. Once Britain's Euroscepticism was the exception and was seen as the biggest threat of the future of the EU, Now other countries pose a far bigger danger thanks to the political discontents unleashed by the euro. There are plenty of opportunities for revolt. Parliamentary elections take place in Greece, Britain, Denmark, Estonia, Finland, Poland, Portugal, and Spain. Pictured by these dominoes here. Early elections are also expected in Italy. And then, friends, there's one more I should read to you, and then we've got to close up, and I've got a meeting. I've got to get out and take a legally blind fellow to a combined meeting fellowship he wants to go to. And I promised to drive him. But here's one more story. How the European dream is dying state by state. 1930s style, it says. The creates 1930s style politics is the caption for this story. It's never good when neo-Nazi let me try that sentence again, friend. This is plural. It's never good when neo-Nazis who can't even campaign because their leaders are in jail for murdering a political opponent can still manage to come in third in your elections. That's what happened in Greece. Though after its mainstream parties discredited themselves by presiding over so much austerity that voters are willing to turn to quite literally anyone who promises to end it. That includes actual Nazis, crypto-Nazis, actual communists, and former communists like Syriza, who won power, though not an outright majority, with an unexpectedly strong 36% of the vote. It turns out that keeping a country in a 1930s style depression creates 1930s style politics. Europe isn't panicking, though, because things are going according to plan, or at least close enough. Any economist could have told them, and plenty of them did, that something like this was bound to happen if countries share monetary but not fiscal policy. That's because at some point one country will need hard and another will need loose money. And whichever one loses out will spiral out of control if there aren't fiscal, if there aren't fiscal transfers to slow them down or speed them up. But the common currency doesn't have these kind of shock absorbers. That means the euro not only pushes countries into, but also keeps them stuck in depressions. The irony, of course, is that the euro was supposed to be a paper monument to peace and prosperity that brought people together. But for now, at least, it's made prosperity impossible and driven them apart. Instead, reviving old prejudices, stirring new ones, and making people more, not less, nationalistic. So much for a United States of Europe, this article ends. But you know, friends, sometimes something, for it to come together, it's got to come together in a way that's not so traditional. And when World War breaks out, there's a lot of frustration. And right now, there's a lot of frustration. And so, as a result, we could be seeing things happen. Listen, for more stories as we get very current into the news, I want to encourage you to tune in for Nightcast. We'll go over this chart Sunday night about the what's setting the frustration to a level that could cause a United States of Europe to have the kind of frustration behind it where 10 nations, they knock out this and that one, and it comes down to 10, and boom, it springs together. Because those powers that voted in Syriza in Italy recently, you can see the flag waving. They were, by all means, fanatically excited to have an anti-austerity power in force, no matter regardless of what that means. And now, friends, real quickly, from Daniel 2 and Daniel 7, there's a great image and 4 beasts. And let's blow those out a little bit. If we look at Daniel 2, there's a great image. The head of gold at the top was King Nebuchadnezzar. The arms and silver, the arms and breast of silver represented the Persian Empire. And the belly and thighs of brass, this represented Greece. And under Alexander the Great and 4 divisions, which began in 333 A.D. And Daniel 7 pictures Greece as the third of 4 beasts, as a leopard with 4 heads. The third, and these represented the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th heads of prophetic Babylon. Daniel 8 also pictured Greece as a goat with 1 great horn and 4 notable horns. I'm going to black out or gray out those that we're not talking about. So Daniel 2, we've got the belly and thighs of brass representing Greece. We've got the 3rd beast, the leopard with 4 heads, from Daniel 7 representing Greece. And we've got the he-goat with 1 great horn and 4 notable horns from Daniel 8 representing Greece under Alexander the Great and 4 divisions that began in 333 A.D. So this thing between Greece and Germany, which is your modern-day Assyrians, who go back in the Bible also, and they had several kings that ruled over the Holy Roman Empire. So you got Greece and Germany struggling for world-ruling power. Greece has got this in their blood. They were once a great world-ruling power. They were the 3rd world-ruling kingdom of the world, even before Germany. And here's a picture on the left side blown up a little closer for you. There's the belly and thighs of brass from Daniel 2. There's the leopard with the 4 heads from Daniel 7. And here's a scripture or two I want to end with, friends. This first one I often read on Nightcast from Luke 21, verse 36, that says, let's bring it back forward, says, "Watch you therefore and pray always, with a promise that you may be accounted worthy to escape all the things that are mentioned in chapter 21 of Luke, that's talking about, first of all, the 4 seals, the religious deception, the 2nd seal, war and world war, the 3rd seal, the black horse famine, the 4th seal, the pale horse, disease epidemics, and trouble, including weather trouble." And friends, another verse I'd like to give you in closing is from Luke 12, verse 37. We were in Luke 21, verse 36. We're a different chapter now. We're going to Luke 12, verse 37, which tells us, "Blessed are those servants whom the Lord, when he comes, shall find watching." So I encourage you, tune in, watch World News. Watch it on Nightcast, watch it yourself, however, whatever, but we do the work for you on Nightcast. There's a great blessing to you. Blessed are those servants whom the Lord, when he comes, finds watching. Shall find watching. And verse 40 of Luke 12 is a good one also that we will close with. "Be you therefore ready also, for the Son of Man comes at an hour when you think not." And just like, friends, those of you who've maybe been on a trip and you got last minute and you're rushing, maybe you even saw some people who didn't make it, maybe yourself didn't make it. If you're 1 minute late after they close that airplane door, tough luck, toodaloo, you missed it. They do not reopen the door and let you in. So this scripture that says, "Be ready, for you know not the hour. The Son of Man comes at an hour when you think not." You don't even want to be a minute late, because if you hesitate when it's time, if you're counted worthy and it's time to go, you could blow your being accounted worthy if you hesitate. So be ready. Or you could blow being accounted worthy by just not making yourself ready. thanks for tuning in here today, friends. I again encourage you, tune in for Nightcast, Sunday through Thursday night. We cover the day's current news as it's happening, and we try to help you understand the meaning of it and how it relates to the seals and how and why we should all be ready. I got to be ready to go pick up a friend, so I'm going to sign off quickly. Thanks for joining me this Sabbath. Have a good Sabbath and rest of the Sabbath. If you missed the first part of this, I'm playing it all day. In a couple of minutes from now, we'll recycle and replay what we just played here for you today. And if I can find a slide to put up to sign off with, I don't know what this is. Let me see. Well, maybe I'll just have to say so long, friends, because I didn't have a slide ready to cover us on this. So, look, I'll just say thank you for joining me. Happy Sabbath, and this will play again and again throughout today. Happy Sabbath, everyone.